in here. Tonight we are going to make chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes and gravy, homemade biscuits, and then a fruit and salad. So let's get our potatoes in so we can make up our mashed potatoes. So I've got 4 pretty big russet potatoes here that we're going to give a quick peel, and then we're going to pop them in to make some mashed potatoes. Say nothing is better than chicken fried steak with some gravy and mashed potatoes. It's just such a good comfort food. And we've had some pretty dreary weather here, and it kind of just feels like a chicken fried steak day. We had a couple tornadoes touch down here in Middle Tennessee. And of course, you know, we had to get that when we were trying to fly home from Miami, which made our 2-hour flight turn into a 12-hour delay in flight. But we finally got in last night at around 3 a.m. So comfort food is what we want. Looks like this potato had a little bruise on it. Just cut that part off. Your potato is still good. It's just that is either where it's been dropped or had like a little root sprig on it. We've got 1 potato down. We've got a few more to go. And I may only cut up 3 because these are some pretty big potatoes. So I'm going to start with 3 and then I'll see if I need to add a 4th one in. But we're only feeding 5 today. So it's not as big of a dinner as usual. I had one of my kids is at a friend's house working on a project. And then my little one, because of the tornadoes last night, and we had to get my husband to get everybody up because the sirens were going off here. He was very, very cranky because nothing is worse than waking up a baby in the middle of the night. And so he went to bed early because he was just so exhausted. So it's a smaller now, table tonight, but just as delicious food. Okay, we've got this one up. I always make sure I peel my potatoes well because my kids do not like any skins in their mashed potatoes. They like a nice smooth mashed potato. So I want to make sure I got all of them off, and I think 3 is going to be enough because these are like pretty big. Okay, we're going to kind of cut them all into about some nice cubes. We want them to all be about the same size so that they cook up evenly. Because with russet potatoes, if they're uneven in size, you're going to have some go to mush while other ones stay firm. And then it will just give you really lumpy mashed potatoes. And nobody wants lumpy mashed potatoes. Okay, so I'm just aiming for a potato piece kind of like that big. And then again, trying to keep them as close as possible. Because when I do check for when they're done, I'm going to check for my biggest potato to make sure my biggest potato is cooked all the way through. Because those are the ones, if they're undercooked, that's where you're going to get your chunk in your mashed potato. Okay, so I'm cutting this into thirds. And then we're just going to kind of cube it off here. Perfect. And there we go. We're just going to get these cooked up because my mashed potatoes are about the one thing on our dish that's going to take the longest. And then it's going to be our biscuits. So we're going to get these going. Then we're going to prep our biscuits. And then we're going to make our chicken fried steak. Which if you've never had chicken fried steak, you don't use like a true steak cut. You kind of use mock tender steak or eye of round, like a cheap cut of meat. So here we've got, these are just mock tender cut steaks, but it's a cheaper cut of beef. And we're going to hammer it out thinner. And then we're going to batter it as if we were going to fry fried chicken fried steak. It's a big Southern dish. And it's absolutely delicious. And that's a great way to use some of those cheap cuts of beef and just have it a little change up. There we go. So we've got our 3. I think that's definitely going to be enough for tonight. So we got 3 big russet potatoes for our mashed potatoes. So we're going to come over here. I got my water starting to go. We're going to add them in because these are going to take the longest. And you know what? Sometimes I added a bit too much water, so we're just going to dump a little bit out. I always eyeball it sometimes. but it's nice because I'll pour off all that starch that already floated up. And there we go. Okay, we got our potatoes in here. I'm going to give them a nice stir because a lot of times when you drop them in, they can touch down on the bottom of your pan and that starch can make them stick and then they can get like burnt to the bottom of it. So just give it a nice stir. And then we're going to let those come to a boil. Now I'm just going to turn that away. Now we are going to work on our biscuits. So we're going to make some sourdough biscuits. So we're going to start with the drink and then we're going to add in our wet. So we need some flour, which I'm going to grab right over here because we're going to use it for our chicken fried steak in just a second. So we're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Don't use bread flour and don't use self-rising. You want to just use good old all-purpose flour. We're going to add them into our bowl. Make it full. Perfect. And then we're going to add in our baking powder, our baking soda, and our salt. And we're going to give it a quick stir. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Make sure you use baking powder, not baking soda, or you'll have really poofy biscuits. So we're going to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And then 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. And that's just going to give the biscuits a little extra pop. So I don't have 1/4. What I do is I just take my half. And you just kind of fill it up halfway and you put it in there. Perfect. And now we're going to use 1/2 teaspoon of salt. 1/2 teaspoon. And now I'm going to use my pastry cutter right here. My pastry cutter. And we are just going to kind of stir it around to kind of mix those ingredients up. You could always get out a whisk for this if you wanted to, but why waste extra dishes when my pastry cutter is going to do just fine. And now I've got a stick of cold butter. Make sure it's very cold. And we're going to cut it into our flour here. So I'm just going to take off the wrapper and I'm using salted butter. And
people are complaining about the audio again.
Oh, and you know what it's saying?
You want to grab the other one?
Yeah, let's just grab the other mic. We got these new. They're kind of not working here, so we'll switch them out. Here we go. You know, you always try something because you think it's going to be better, and just sometimes it doesn't work out. So, are you ready for me to connect it? Okay, hopefully this works, guys. And we got these new mics, and so far they've been not user friendly, but we'll go back with our classic. Okay, awesome, good. I'm great for the feedback. Always give it because we always want to help you guys best we can. So we're gonna take our butter and make sure it's cold. I got this right out of the fridge, and then I'm just gonna take my butter knife and go right through it, and we're gonna start kind of cubing it into our flour. It just makes it a little bit easier when we're using our pastry cutter to cut it up, do a little less elbow work. Now, you could always use a food processor if you wanted to cut your butter into your flour. But I find that pastry cutter, it only takes a little bit of elbow grease in like a minute, and it's probably less time than it would for you to haul out your food processor, get it put together, and then clean it. So I've got it, and we're just going to kind of push into our cut butter with our pastry cutter, which is essentially like 5 knives put together. And we're just going to cut it in until we have butter that is smaller than a pea. And this is going to give you the nice flaky crumb in our biscuits. And I do have my oven preheated to 400 degrees because that's what we're going to bake it on. There we go. Now I'm just going to go through and pop some of this out. There we go. And then we're going to cut these up Perfect. And you just go over and you really just kind of do a push and a twist. And it really doesn't take you long to cut that butter up. And that's why I always say just take the extra minute or two and do it with your hands. It saves you a lot of dishes and a lot of hauling out. And if you don't even have a food processor, it saves you those. I do have a food processor, but I rarely use it. I think the only time I truly use my food processor is when I'm making ravioli or almond paste for my almond pastry, because those are just hard to do by hand. Okay, I've got my butter cut into my flour, and I have no pieces, no big chunks. Okay, go through, make sure I have nothing in here. Just clear off because you want to make sure all your butter gets in your biscuit. Perfect. Now we're going to do our wet ingredients. So we have heavy cream, or not heavy cream, half and half. I didn't have heavy cream or half and half, so I just used half milk and half cream, which is what half and half is. So we're going to use a half a cup of that, and we're going to use a cup of sourdough discard. So let me get a small bowl here so we can kind of mix them together. A little bit bigger. I always like to mix them together so that they mix evenly into the biscuit mix. So we're going to put our half and half, so a half a cup of half and half. And then we're going to use 1 cup of sourdough discard and give it a nice little stir. And then just fill it all the way up. Perfect. And this is, I will say, these sourdough discard biscuits are a great kind of recipe that uses a lot of discard.
You have a question? Did you get a little sun while you were gone?
I did get a little sun, and it wasn't sunny. I will tell you that. Mix this up. So it was like raining almost the whole time while we were in Miami. And I didn't think while we were sitting in the rain that I would get a lot of sun. I was very wrong, and I got a lot of sun. So it would like rain for like 10 minutes, and then it would stop for 5, and then it would rain. So I was soaked, but in between those rain, the sun would come out, and it was like 75, 76 degrees, so not very hot. But it was much closer, and I did definitely get a lot of sun. And I loved it because I didn't realize how much sun I had until I was on the airplane, and I went to the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I'm like, I'm a tomato, a complete tomato. And I was like, I told my mom and my daughter, and I was like, you guys didn't even tell me how, messy my face was and how red it was. So yes, I did. But I unfortunately am allergic to sunscreen. So like 2 years ago, I think they changed some ingredient or something in it, but I broke out 6 times in one summer using different sunscreen brands. And I had to go on steroids so many times. So I always am trying to like have my hat on or have my big sunglasses on, but I'm always get burned like the first weekend or 2 of spring because I'm just not ready for the sun. Okay, so I put my discard and my cream in here, and I'm just using a fork to kind of mix it up until kind of it's a shaggy dough. So we see how we've got a nice little shag here. So it's kind of, little chunks. Now we're going to do the fun part where we're going to do our press and folds to create the flaky layers. I'm going to turn this. Potatoes are going good, so I'm just going to turn them a smidge down. Okay, let me clear up that cream right there so it doesn't get sticky. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my biscuits out. All of it on here. You see it's very shaggy right now, but trust me, it will not be like that in just a second. So with biscuits, you don't want to knead it. You want to press, and then you want to fold on top of it. Press and fold. Every press ending down and fold creates this delicious flaky layer in your biscuit. So you don't knead is going to get you a rock. It's going to get you a stiff biscuit. You just need to do the simple press and fold. So, and that's like, it's as I said, it's like you're folding everything onto it. But think about like when you see the flaky layers, that is literally like every time you do it, it's a new layer that you create. Perfect. And now we're just going to kind of push it out to about a 1-inch thickness. And the thing is, you really don't want to knead it because you don't want it to get stiff. You want it to be nice and flaky. So here, perfect. I'm trying to get it nice. And then I got my baking sheet and we're going to line it with some parchment paper. And we're going to cut out our little circles for our biscuit. So let me get this ready and I'll bring it right over here. And then I have my biscuit cutter. And I always bake on parchment paper because it is just so much easier. And so we've got through here, I've got my nice little circle. And I don't know if you can see the flaky layers before you build, but they're all in there. And this is going to give you just those absolutely delicious biscuits that you can break apart and put with some jam. Okay, and we're going to cut all of these up. Now this is about a 2-inch biscuit cutter, but you can do them smaller if you like. These are just kind of like what my kids really like the perfect size. There we go. I'm going to see. And then the trick is you just kind of want them to make sure they're all like really the same height as best as possible. And then what I do with my last bits, because I don't like to waste it, we're just going to do a couple more presses and folds into each other to kind of reshape them. But I will tell you, your leftover kind of discard pieces here always make a little bit more of a funky biscuit that kind of like to pop a bit more. So they're not as picture perfect as your first set, but no need for it to go to waste. There we go. And kind of press and fold. You just don't want to you don't want to knead it. There we go. So this can be a teeny tiny biscuit.
We have a question if we're streaming to multiple locations, and Sharon, yes, we're live streaming to multiple different streams.
Yes. There we go. So, and then we just got this itty bitty baby biscuit. I always say I never like any of it to go to waste. And so what we're going to do is we've got our biscuits here. We're going to brush the top of them with a bit of cream, and then we're going to pop these in the oven for 15 minutes at 400 degrees. So you don't need much, just maybe a tablespoon in here. And then so you don't need much, just maybe a tablespoon in here. And then we're going to, so just dip it in here. And then I'm just going to cover it just like this. And this is going to give you that nice kind of golden brown on the tips of your biscuit. And you can add also, you can add a bit of salt on the top if you wanted, or if you want a sweeter biscuit, you could sprinkle a little bit of sugar. But I just like to keep mine kind of a plain Jane and just have it with cream. That way I can decide whether I want it to be a savory biscuit or a sweet biscuit. So we just got all of our tops kind of brushed off. Perfect. And now we're going to pop these guys in the oven. Okay. And so I'm going to put these towards the top of my oven at 400 degrees. And you want to make sure your oven is preheated, not right when it dings, but it's been preheating for a good like 5 to 10 minutes.
You have a question? Was that heavy cream?
Yes, heavy cream. You can use half and half, but I just like to use heavy cream. I feel like it gives a nice golden color. You can even use milk in a pinch if you want, or egg wash. But again, I typically just have heavy cream, and whenever I need half and half, I add some milk to mine, so I don't have to buy both heavy cream and half and half. It's kind of like a win-win. Okay. Let's get these potatoes away and let's make our chicken fried steak. So again, we have, these are for chicken fried steak. You're going to use a kind of a cheaper cut on your meat. So this is a mocked tender steak, which is typically like an eye of round, or just in general, not a ribeye or not a New York strip. Those you just want to kind of cook the way. These are definitely ones that will benefit from being like fried and whatnot. So we're going to use my meat tenderizer here, and we're just going to thin them out just a little bit because you want them to cook up nicely. We're going to go, and this also keeps them nice and tender. And now you don't want to put them out too thin, but here's kind of like my ideal thickness on them. We'll just hammer them out. So just like if we were doing a chicken breast, this helps make them nice and tender as well as evenly cooked. You know, if you make them too thick, then it takes a lot longer to cook them through. So. Plus, you know, if you never tenderized meat before, it's actually kind of fun. You know, for the longest time, I didn't have a meat tenderizer. I used a garlic press that I wrapped in like press and seal to flatten mine out. And I was like, you know what? I make enough flattened out meat that I should probably get one. I will say it's kind of loud in here with my pan underneath it. Okay. This guy's, he needs a little bit more love. He doesn't want to flatten out well for me. Let's see. Here. I might give him a little cut. So sometimes you have, there we go, a little tendon or whatnot in there. That's perfect. That keeps you from wanting to flatten out. Beautiful. Get him over. And I will recommend, like, you can buy the thinner cut meat, but I would always recommend it like tendering it out just a little bit, because it does make for a nicer, more tender meat. There we go. Flip this guy over.
Do you have a question? Is that how they make cube steak?
Yes, that is like a way that you can make cube. They actually use an even spikier one, but cube steak works for this. So you could already buy it cubed already, and that would work. This is just one of those ones where you can, I just got mock tender steak. But yes, like a lot of grocery stores carry the cube steak, and you can use that for this. Okay, we've got our meat ready. Let's make our first of our mixes. We're going to make our flour mixture, then we'll do our egg, and then we're going to put a little bit of breadcrumb in there to make it extra delicious. Okay, so we're going to start. We don't have too terrible a lot here, so we're going to start off with about a cup and a half of all-purpose flour. And then we're going to add some seasonings, because this is where your meat's going to get its flavor. So you don't want to skimp on your seasonings. So we've got some table blend. This is just kind of a mix of a bunch of seasonings, but I love it. I use it for a lot of it. So I'm going to use about a tablespoon. Perfect. And that's good so that you get like nice flavor in every bite. Then we're going to use some smoked paprika and take off. And we're going to use about a teaspoon and a half to 2 teaspoons. So that's a 1 teaspoon. There's about 2. This is going to give it a nice color. We're going to use about a teaspoon of black pepper. Perfect. And then we're going to use a little bit of Lowry seasoned salt, which is kind of like a celery salt, but it adds a great flavor. We're going to use a little bit of this and a little bit of garlic salt. So we're going to use about a teaspoon of this and a teaspoon of garlic salt, which I'll shake on here. And then we're going to use a little bit of onion powder, and that's our seasoning. But again, you want it to be well seasoned. The onion powder is delicious because it gives that nice onion flavor. And we're going to use about a teaspoon and a half of it. And I will really say you can't really over season it. because this is just on the breading. So it's got to make a flavor all through. So we're going to stir it up with our fork. There we go. Mix it all the way around. And then we're going to dredge our meat through it. But before we do that, let's make our little egg wash. We're going to use 3 eggs and this a dash of cream to make kind of a little batter. Perfect. So we've got those mixed up. Now let's get our eggs ready. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm just going to use this fork. We're going to pop each yolk. Give it a quick mix. We want to make sure we mix all of the yolks into the egg whites. Perfect. And then I have my cream over here. We're just going to put a splash in, like a tablespoon, not too much. But this is just going to help give you more of a batter feel on your chicken fried steak versus just a breading. So we're going to mix this up. You could use buttermilk too if you had it. There we go. Okay. And now I'm going to open up my breadcrumbs so that when it's time, they'll be ready to pour in, because this gets to be a little bit messy.
You have a question? Is that cube steak?
This is mock tender steak that I tenderize. So it's essentially cube steak that you can use. I just did the extra work on it. So we're going to dredge each one in our seasoned flour here. Beautiful. You just want to make sure you coat it. And I always like, a lot of people just do a plain flour dredging. I make sure it's seasoned because this is what touches the meat first. So this is going to give the most flavor to it as well. We've got it. And I'm going to cover these guys all the way up. Make sure you get it everywhere. Push a little bit more on here. And then, perfect. Okay. Now, this is my clean hand. We're going to put about, I want to say, a 1/2 cup to a cup of breadcrumbs in here. I'm going to give it a nice stir. And this is going to give you a nice crunch on your breading. And I'm using this as, you can use panko, but these are just, I just had Italian, but Italian style breadcrumbs, which have a little extra seasoning in them. But this is going to give you that nice crunch. Panko will give you an even better crunch. I recommend panko. We ran out of them. So now what we're going to do is we're going to stick them and we're going to coat them in the egg wash. And that flour coating is what helps keep the egg wash on there. And then I like to just kind of dump my seasoned breadcrumbs and flour mixture over it, pressing it in. And now we've got a nice, lovely breaded steak. Here we go. You want to make sure you get it all the way around. Perfect. And we're going to coat this guy up. And I always find, like, you can just push it around, but just kind of scooping it on there. And that's why I say just do it with one hand, because one hand will get very dirty. And it's always nice to have a clean hand free. We dredge this guy. Perfect. And then I just pick it up and I scoop it on. And for those of you who joined us late, our flavored, this flour right here, we seasoned with Lowry seasoned salt, onion powder, Mrs. Dash's table blend, black pepper, smoked paprika, and a little bit of garlic salt to kind of just give this delicious kind of savory seasoning to it. Now, if you like a little bit of heat, you could definitely add in some red pepper or some chipotle seasonings, and that would give you definitely a spicer to it. But I like a more savory one. I'm a bit of a spice wimp. But I do know that lots of people like spicy, spicy fried stuff. And that's really easy. That's something that's pretty easy to just add in to elevate it. There we go. 2 more left.
Yeah. Question: what sides are you making?
We are making mashed potatoes and then biscuits. We just put our sourdough discard biscuits. I have those in the oven cooking. And then we're going to have a salad and some strawberries. So, but nice, kind of like a nice comfort food meal. It's kind of what we needed. We had some dreary storms here in Tennessee yesterday. And then my oldest daughter and I were flying out of Fort Lauderdale, and it was like storms and delays and rerouting flights, picking different flights in a mad rush to get home. We were fortunate out of my daughter's soccer team. Only 2 of us made it home yesterday. The rest, some of them got diverted into Atlanta and then had to spend the night. Some never even left Florida. So at least we got home. It was 3 a.m, but at least we got home. Okay, we've got these all breaded up. I open my oil up here with my clean hand. I'm going to start getting our oil nice and hot. And I'm going to give my hands a nice wash. And we'll start frying them up. You just want to you don't need a whole bunch of oil that it's soaking. You just want a nice little layer on the bottom of your pan. And this is a pretty big pan, so it's probably going to be about 1/3 to 1/2 a cup of oil, but you don't need it soaking. You know what I mean? We're not completely deep frying it.
Did you have a comment? Someone is making the minestrone soup and the grilled sandwiches for dinner.
Oh, awesome. Good. I hope you guys love it. Even when my son came home from school, he was like, "Oh, Mom, can I have some soup?" And I wasn't sure if he was going to like it because I typically make our lunches for, my husband and I and my parents, and he loved it. And then my 3-year-old, when he woke up from nap, he was like, "Soup? Soup?" So I had to, he was eating it. So everyone really liked it. It was a really good batch of soup today. I always make minestrone and I have kind of different variations of it, but I felt like today's with all the fresh herbs was perfect. Okay, we're going to let this oil heat up. It takes a few minutes to get going. You don't want to put your chicken fried steak in the oil before it is hot because otherwise it will be soggy. So while we're doing that, I'm just going to clean these guys up. We're done with that. And let me get this little bit of this mess right here. I will say it's always very messy when you make it, but it's worth it. It's delicious. Okay, just want to clean up a little bit of this breading mix, and then we're going to prep our salad. There we go. I was like, what are we having again? Our salad and our strawberries tonight while we get our oil nice and hot. And I'm also going to check real quick the potatoes and see how they are. So the way I check my potatoes, and this is, make sure, because I want to say my kids do not like lumpy potatoes. So I'm going in here and I'm going to find the biggest one. And if my fork can push through easily, they're ready. So you see, I'm not getting an easy push through. I can do it, but they need about a minute or 2 more. You want to be able to just smush your fork through the biggest potato. And that is when you're going to know it is ready to be drained and made into mashed potatoes. So these are close.
Yeah, 2 questions. First is, what type of meat are you using? And the second is, what type of salad are you making tonight?
So our meat, we used mock tender steak, and then we tenderized it out. So it's essentially like a cube steak, and that's where they pre-tenderized it for you at the store. You could also use eye of round for it. And then a salad, we are just making a basic garden salad. So actually, we'll get all my stuff right here for my garden salad. My kids, when it comes to salads, they are like plain Janes. They just like the basic tomatoes, peppers, onions, and just romaine lettuce. If I try to put a spring mix in there or spinach, they just like the crunch. And we have big, strong opinions. Some like the really crunchy, like whiter leaves of romaine, and some demand the nice fluffy green. So it's funny. I'm always picking them out and dividing them into the bowls to make everyone's needs. Okay, our biscuits are done. And I think our oil is done. So let's pop our first ones in and then we'll grab our biscuits out. So let me see. Yep, you see when you put your water in, and you get a quick bubble, that means they are done. So we're going to put our first ones in, and then we'll get our biscuits out. Perfect. And we'll get a little one right here. There we go. Okay, we've got those cooking in there. And my oven loves to let me know that it is done, and it's done, and it's done. I will say I love the oven in the sense that it incessantly beeps, but if I'm like away from it when it beeps, it's so annoying. Beautiful. Look at these wonderful biscuits, and they've got a nice golden crust. You can see those flaky layers, how perfect they are. And these are the ones where I told you, these are our Frankenstein ones, where when you put them together, even though you smush them there, they always turn out a little Frankenstein. But they are gorgeous. I'm gonna go get a trivet to put them on. But look at these just beautiful flaky layers. I want to pick one up because they're nice enough. But do you see how they just burst there? That is from the press and fold. The press and fold is where it is at. You can't knead them. You just put them in there, and every fold and press makes a new flaky layer.
Do you have a question? Do you put anything in the water for the mashed potatoes? Some people use chicken bouillon.
Some people do, and I've heard them salted. I just boil them straight in the water as it is, and then I don't use anything else in it. But I know lots of people who do. I like to add mine in when I add the cream. We are going to reserve a little bit of this water for our gravy. I like to use the potato water for the gravy because it's hot and it's starchy, which will thicken it up. So we're going to drain these real quick, get some of that water, and then we'll be ready to make our mashed potatoes. So I'm going to get my lid here. I'm going to turn it off, and I'll show you. They didn't need much, but let me pull one out, and I'm going to show you what I mean when I'm going to get a nice big potato. And then look, you see how you can just smush right through it? That is when you know your potatoes are ready. You always got to grab your biggest potato. So I'm going to put these guys on. I turn my oil down just a little bit. And here. We're going to do the lid where we're going to strain a little bit of it out. I'm going to save a little bit. There we go. And then the rest is going to go in here. There we go. Perfect. So we've got our potatoes strained. And what I like to do when they're nice and hot like this, I'm going to pop my butter in right now so it can start to melt. I'm not going to whip them up yet. I'm going to wait until this butter has melted. So we're just going to stick it in there. I'm going to use maybe a half a stick. We're going to just stick it under there, let it melt up in there. Now my chicken should be just about ready to flip. My chicken fried steak. Perfect. We've got this nice kind of golden crust on. Okay. I might do that one a little bit more on it because one side gets a little bit hotter, but they're doing great. I've got my heat down to my oil to about a 4 out of 10. So I start high and then I turn it down because if your oil is too hot, you're going to burn it and you're not going to cook it all the way through. Okay. Let's get a baking sheet out. This is going to be for where we're going to put our chicken fried steak on once it's done cooking so it can kind of collect some of that oil. So put a little bit of paper towels down. And this helps kind of keep it crispy because if you put them out and you just let them sit, the oil makes it soggy. Good. Let's get our salad going right here. Let me pull up my knife here. So we've got our tomatoes. We got a little bit of a red onion. And we've got some peppers. We're just going to make a simple garden salad here.
You got some comments that the kids are being quiet.
Yes, they're off playing. It's always like they get done with their homework and then they're all playing together. Although it's funny, a lot of times they'll peek their heads in and they poke. And we always invite them if they want to come in, but I think they're very shy. So you may see one. Sometimes I will say, sometimes Teddy joins us and he'll pull up his little kitchen tower and kind of cook with us. But I also think they're a little bit shy. And I always say, I'm like, oh, I probably should do a meet and greet. You know, everyone gets to do, like, see them. But again, I want it to be on my kids' terms. If they want to come in and be on, you know, in public, then that should be up to them. Okay, so we've got some red onions on here. And then we're going to slice up some sweet peppers. Just some nice. Perfect. Give these my kids who just absolutely love sweet peppers. And I just buy them in bulk, like the big bags of them. Okay. And I say, we just do a very simple salad. Sometimes I do, when I'm doing a lunch salad, I'll do a bit more of a bougie one. But this is just for a simple salad for dinner tonight as our side. And just a garden one, nothing special, nothing bougie.
Your kids eat onions?
They will eat onions, red onions. Now, they'll eat cooked and caramelized onions, no problem. It just really depends on which kids. Some like them more. Some, they love pickled onions. I will say those are delicious. But it just really depends on each kid and their preference. I will say, having 5 kids, there are very few meals that every kid likes. I can name like 2, you know. Ravioli. Well, Evie doesn't like ravioli, but spaghetti and meatballs, steak, and then fried fish or fried chicken, they like those. But there's always somebody who has an opinion. And my goal is I always make sure that then there are sides that everyone likes. So even if they don't like the main dish, there is something that they like. Like my daughter, Evie, she does not like potatoes in any way, shape, or form, which is like crazy. But she's missing out. But she loves salad and she loves fruit. So, and she loves chicken fried steak. So we've got our first one coming off right here. There we go. And cook these ones. I turned those just a little prematurely. Like I said, everybody has a little wonky spot in their stove. Mine is hotter here than it is right here. So I always am trying to like cook them evenly as best I can. Okay, let's get our potatoes here. I'm gonna got my butter in here. We're gonna give it a nice drizzle of heavy cream. About maybe 1/4 of a cup. Sometimes you need more, but we won't know until we do the first whip up. And then I'm gonna put about a teaspoon of salt in. And then let me grab my hand beaters. Runaway tomato. Okay, so I like to whip mine right in my pot. This is because I have this is an all clad, but a metal pot. If yours is a non-stick pot, do not beat your mashed potatoes in it or you will have ruined your pot. Put it in a bowl first if you have a non-stick one. Let's get these this meat out real quick.
You have a question? What's the difference between using milk and heavy whipping cream?
So cream is a higher fat content. It's essentially what you make butter out of. And so it just gives a richer, creamier, more decadent mashed potato. So I always say milk is your diet mashed potatoes. Cream is the one where you're going for the full taste and the full body. So I am a firm believer that mashed potatoes are never meant to be diet, just like French fries are not diet. So if you make them the right way. Gotta use the cream. Okay, let's got these ones cooking up now. And let's whisk this up real quick. Right in here. And then I may add a bit more salt or cream just based on their texture. I like a nice fluffy mashed potatoes, not one that's too dense. There you go. Perfect. Okay, let's give it a taste. A pinch more cream and a pinch more salt. And that's why I said some potatoes are starchier than others. And so I never know exactly how much cream I need until I've whipped them up. So I want them to be nice and fluffy, which means I need just a pinch more. There we go. Give them a nice high now. Perfect. There we go. And then let's see, I'll kind of get my spatula out so you guys can see what I want when I make my mashed potatoes. So you've just got this nice, they're thick, but they will drop easily. I don't want them to run, but I want them to be a nice thick.
You have a question? What type of potatoes and how many was it?
So these were russet potatoes, and they were really big. So they were 3 huge ones. But if you were to use like your regular size, it would be about 5 to 6. But they were massive. They're like the good baking potatoes. Okay, let's get our strawberries cut up. And once we're done frying this chicken, we can make our gravy that goes, or not chicken fried steak. We can get our gravy that goes on it. So let me give a quick rinse of our strawberries here. I always wait to wash my strawberries right before I cut them, because if you wash them too soon, they get a little soggy. Let's get our knife, and we're just going to chop the tops off, and I'm just going to slice them up. I always try, like I said, I can't please all of my kids. You know, I learned that lesson growing up. My mom used to always say, I can't please all of you. And my mom had 7, but there were 10 of us because we had 3. My father had 3 older kids from a previous marriage, half brothers. And so imagine trying to make 10 kids happy. There's no way to make 10 kids happy. And so that was always her every night. Oh, I can't please all of you. And everyone had an opinion about something. And I kind of run with that. I know I can't make it. I've accepted it. And so what I do is I try to make sure that there is at least 1 to 2 things on the plates that the kids like. And that way they're happy. You know what I mean? Even if they're having a huge serving of strawberries, they're happy. That way you can keep the peace somewhat. And then I always try to, each kid, I let them kind of pick out one of the things that we're making for the week, so they have an input. My daughter, Evie, it's always spaghetti and meatballs. Are we going to have spaghetti and meatballs? My oldest daughter, if you ask her, the one thing she says, steak. Can we have steak? Always. There we go. Flip this over, give it a rotate. Finish cutting up some of these strawberries. And what I like to do when strawberries are out of season is you just sprinkle a little bit of sugar on them. You don't need much, like a teaspoon for a whole bowl. They will make all the difference in bringing out the natural sweetness of the strawberry. Okay, let's get this. And I will say, we go through a lot of fruit. So this is a 2-pound box of strawberries, and they will eat it all for dinner tonight. Strawberries go so fast in here, and I'm always like, oh, there goes $10. But it's good. It's healthy. And that's why I sit there and I'm like, I was fortunate that I always grew up on fresh fruit versus the canned fruit or whatnot. And so I always try to make sure my kids have fresh fruit every day so that they're not addicted to the sugar. Let's see where we're getting on these guys. Perfect. A little bit longer. You want a nice golden coat. Just turn them in there. But you see, you don't need a whole lot of oil to fry up our chicken fried steak because you just need to kind of crisp it up on each side. It doesn't need to be soaking in it. I think a lot of people think when they do a fried food or a pan fry, they need to have like a bucket of oil. A little can go a long way because you just need to kind of crisp up each side of it. And, because I know a lot of people, they say you can reuse oil, but I find that it gets too dirty too quickly and it just never keeps well. So I do toss it out like every single one. I like to just blot it up with paper towels and then throw them out. But I try to use as little as possible, but to get the right cooking one. So we've got our strawberries here. Let's get a little bit of sugar. Just shake a little over. I will say I always keep in my kitchen on my things, I have little jars of salt, pepper, sugar, and flour because those are ones that you always need a little pinch. You need a pinch for gravy. You need a pinch for your strawberries, but having those in little jars is great. Okay, we are about ready to make our gravy. There we go. Perfect. We got a nice. Okay, so we're going to make our gravy, but we're not going to use all of this oil. You see there's a lot of oil in there, so we're going to drain a little bit of out, but you want those drippings. Those drippings are going to be like solid gold in your thing. So we're going to drain a little bit of this oil out. Let's get this out of the way. So it's hot. So what I do is I'm just going to get another little ceramic container, and we're going to spill just a little bit. We just need a little bit in there because you want your gravy. You don't want it to be super oily. There we go. We've got some of this is that hot potato starch water. You could use plain water if you wanted. And let me get my flour because we're going to make a little bit of a roux base for our gravy. And that is essentially, we're going to use the oil that's in there. I'm going to put a little bit of butter, not much. We're going to melt that up and we're going to whisk it together with some flour. And that's going to make our roux base for our gravy. Let me grab a whisk. So we're going to mix it around. I've got my heat on low.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you like your Hexaplat pans?
I absolutely love them. I made the switch 2 years ago, and they have been great. Haven't scratched them yet, and I had Calphalon and Cuisinart before for the non-stick, and I love these. Okay, so I've put about 2 tablespoons of flour in here, and we're making this as kind of like our roux, which is a mixture of like fat and flour. We're going to stir it up. And then, there we go. We're going to use, because we're making kind of what we call like a sawmill gravy. We're going to use some cream. We're going to use our potato starch and a little bit of chicken bouillon. So I'm going to put my chicken bouillon in. Just about a spoonful, because we're going to use just about a cup or so of it, of our potato starch. I'm going to mix it up in here. We're going to add a little bit of our starchy potato water. Now, again, you can use just, like water if you wanted to, or chicken broth.
You have a question on the cut of meat?
Yes. The cut of meat for it, I used mock tender steak. You can use eye of round, or you can use cube steak. Here we go. We're adding a bit of our cream in here. We're going to add a bit more of our starchy potato water, and this is to make a nice sawmill gravy with the drippings that we're going to have over our chicken fried steak. So we're going to go mix it around, but we made that roux, and once you add the liquids in it, it makes this nice thick kind of lush gravy. that is very flavorful because you have all these little like crispy bits from the chicken breading, and then you have that kind of the chicken bouillon.
You have a question? How do you tenderize the steak?
I used it's a kind of it looks kind of like a hammer, but it's a meat tenderizer, and I just hammer it. And that's how it kind of flattens it out. Okay. We're going to taste this, see if we need to add any salt or pepper to our gravy. A little bit of pepper. And then I think we are golden with it. And we are ready to serve up, guys. So let's put a little bit of, lost a strawberry. There we go. So we're going to use about maybe a fourth of a teaspoon. And the reason they call this sawmill gravy is if you actually look at it, it looks like there's sawdust in it. And that's just the term it always has come from. It's like a very Southern thing. Okay, we've got our gravy, we got our mashed potatoes, we got our salad. We are ready to plate up dinner. So for dinner, let me get my tongs. Oh, there they are. Got my tongs. So we have our chicken fried steak here with a nice, delicious breading. We've got our mashed potatoes. Can't go wrong with mashed potatoes. Let me get a nice scoop of the gravy. And we're going to drizzle over. And I've got it. You got to have it on both the mashed potatoes and the chicken fried steak. There we go. And then, of course, we'll have a nice serving of salad and our biscuits. So we've got our salad coming right up here. And last but not least, these delicious biscuits. Look at those flaky layers. This is our dinner tonight, and we'll have our fresh fruit on the side. So we made our delicious chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes and sawmill gravy, and then we made our our sourdough discard biscuits using our sourdough discard and a fresh salad. So pretty yummy, easy comfort food dinner. And be great, especially with this kind of dreary weather out there. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're cooking for our family and everything. But again, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and